Hello and welcome into the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. I'm National Recruiting Analyst Cooper Petagna alongside 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting Andrew Ivins. We got a great show for you today, this Tuesday. We had some news coming down the pipe. Just another Tuesday. We got a Georgia Bulldog suing a Florida Gator. We'll talk about that in a second. We'll also talk about Elite 11 State College, another Bulldog in contention there, and Ryan Montgomery taking home the Alpha Dog honors from yours truly, Andrew Ivins. And then we'll talk about five-star Dakorien Moore out of Texas, the highly touted receiver decommitting from LSU. And then we'll preview a top 247 update right around the corner. And no better man to talk to than Andrew Ivins. And Drew, I guess we can start at the top with the Rashada news, and I'll read you a little excerpt from CBS Sports. Rashada, he sued Florida head coach Billy Napier, top Gators booster Hugh Hathcock, former football staffer Marcus Castro Walker over a failed name, image, and likeness deal that would have paid the quarterback $13.85 million, according to a lawsuit filed in federal court on Tuesday. Specifically, the lawsuit claims fraudulent misrepresentation and inducement, aiding and abetting civil conspiracy to commit fraud, negligent misrepresentation, and a couple more things as well. So we're not legal experts, so we'll stay away from that. But Rashada, one of the most, I would say, well-documented recruitments, especially in the NIL era, has been the NIL kind of poster child. Drew, I can't say I'm surprised. I think Florida's been waiting for the other shoe to drop for quite some time. That being said, this is not easy news for Billy Napier and the Gators to swallow, considering it is a make or break year for Billy Napier in Gainesville. Just your initial thoughts in terms of the news of what you heard this morning with Rashada.
Well, I don't have a law degree, as you pointed out, so I don't have much thoughts on the legal filings and what it's going to mean. I think it's a bit of a, momentum killer for Florida. And Coop, if you look and you read into this, there's some very interesting lines in there. And I think my takeaway sitting here is Florida's kind of shored things up where I don't think the head coach is texting prospective student athletes and brokering these type of deals. I think that's kind of my takeaway. It seems like that is a thing of the past. I think the figures that were offered for Rashada are all over the place. And then really, I was thinking about it while I was making breakfast. I totally forgot Rashada was committed to the University of Miami. So let's say, you look at everything him and his legal camp have put out there. What if Rashada had stuck with the Hurricanes? Miami wouldn't have Cam Ward. Would Florida have DJ Lagway? There was a huge, massive chain reaction. And it's ironic because it's going to kind of play out, I think, week one of the season with Miami traveling to Florida. Cam Ward is going to start that game. Who knows how it would have shaken out this past season for the Hurricanes, but would they have Cam Ward if Rashada took the money from John Ruiz and the Hurricanes? It doesn't seem like they would have been in the market for a quarterback. The last thing, Cooper, my favorite line from John Talty's story on CBSSports.com, and he's quoted someone here. The lawsuit calls these people win-at-all-cost alumni. Need that on a shirt. I want to rock that at a tailgate. So if you're looking for an idea, I think there's one right there. Win at all cost alumni.
That's typically what you call a player, right? Like in the evaluation process. Hey, who's one of those guys win at all cost players? Now we got win at all cost boosters. It makes sense. Drew, the other thing you and I were talking about this, and this has been talked about for quite some time. How did Florida arrive at this number, 13.85? I think Nico Iamaleava has been well documented as well as a quarterback. His NIL deal reportedly around north of $8 million. So if he was the high school quarterback to set the market, how do you arrive at 13.85? That's something I've always thought about. And Drew, the other thing I think about this, Rashada is going to be the first. He's not going to be the last. I think this is going to open the floodgates for college football in terms of lawsuits that you could potentially see, because we've heard it behind the scenes. There's a lot of players who've been pretty upset about, hey, you promised me X. I showed up on campus. I didn't get it. Now you have somebody like Rashada, a very lucrative case, a lot on the line here. But the way that he is being represented by a very prominent lawyer in the state of Florida, you have to think that this is going to open things up a little bit.
Yeah, you said the dollar figure. You keep going back to that. Like, makes you wonder, what is DJ Lagway making at Florida? Because Rashada, didn't he have the highest turnover rate amongst the top 247 quarterbacks in the class of 2022? I mean, that's the year Arch Manning, Jackson Arnold, Nico Imalieva, Dante Moore. It's fascinating that's the guy they pivoted to.
Well, not to mention, right, we talked about it at the beginning of the show, Jaden Rashada. Don't expect to see much of him this year with Carson Beck obviously being QB1 in Athens. What about next year? Right? That game, Georgia, Florida, the other part of this that made me chuckle a little bit, Kirby Smart gave his blessing to Jaden Rashada, the green light to sue Billy Napier. I'm not sure that's how it meant to read, but that was pretty funny as well. So Jaden Rashada starting off the morning hot here on Tuesday. We'll see how that plays out. A lot on the line for both the Rashada camp and the Florida Gators as well. Guys, just a reminder, you are locked into the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. Reminder, you can find us on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. You can also find us on X every Tuesday, Wednesday, noon Eastern time with our Director of Scouting, Andrew Ivins, bringing you all the goods. And speaking of all the goods, Drew, it's been a busy spring on the recruiting trail, and obviously for us as we have made our way to event after event, whether it's a UA Next Combine, whether it's Elite 11 Combine. We had another one this weekend. We actually had two this weekend. You were out in the field along with Hudson Standish with the scouting team. Elite 11 State College in Pennsylvania, and a lot to like there. I mentioned it earlier in the show. Alpha Dog Ryan Montgomery currently committed to the Georgia Bulldogs, but some other notable names there as well. Matt Zollers, we wanted to see the Missouri commit. Malik Washington, another guy that we wanted to get eyes on. Beckham Kritza, who's committed to the Nittany Lions, and a couple other names as well. But Drew, let's start at the top with Ryan Montgomery. This has been a guy that's been pretty widely debated behind the scenes at 24/7 Sports. You've long been a fan. How did the in-person evaluation kind of measure up to what you thought with the tape study?
I mean, this was a deep regional, Cooper. You brought it up. I think there's probably a dozen quarterbacks that are going to get signed with Power 4 programs, some of them underclassmen, but a lot of arms. And Ryan Montgomery, we didn't know if he was actually going to throw. He's dealing with a grade 2 turf toe, hurt late in his basketball season. You didn't see him test, and he was warming up with all the bands on the sidelines. I view Ryan Montgomery, like in my personal evaluation and my own write-up and my own notes on this class, I think he's one of the top processors. And it can get tricky and difficult to kind of see that on tape when you watch games, but he plays in a wide-open offense. When you look at Ryan Montgomery, you wouldn't expect to see him in these empty 4 and 5 wide receiver sets, but he does it. He goes through his progression. So I like him between the ears and how he makes the decisions. And my takeaway coming out of my time at State College is there's more to the athlete with Ryan Montgomery, and there's more to the arm. I thought he could accurately get the football to all 3 levels. He was comfortable on the move. And, how this camp, it's like 3 hours long. I mean, they throw a ton of passes. And that first half of the session, I thought no one had really separated themselves. It was kind of Montgomery, Zollers, Malik Washington. And then as we got towards the tail end, some of these guys fade, and for good reason. I mean, the arm's a little bit fatigued. They don't got ice on it. And Ryan Montgomery, I thought in his final few stations, he was the best of the bunch. So I liked him. He punched his ticket to the Elite 11 finals. We're going to see him out in L.A. in a few weeks. And, Georgia just keeps doing it in terms of getting these Elite 11 quarterbacks. Ryan Puglisi last year, Jaden Rashada, he was a guy that was in the Elite 11, and now they're going to follow it up with Ryan Montgomery. And Coop, what I also like is the fit there in Athens for Ryan Montgomery. I think he's a higher floor prospect. He might not have the highest ceiling. He might not be as physically gifted as some of these other arms in the class that we have ranked a little bit higher, but he can distribute the football. And you think about UGA, what they want to do. They want to win at the point of attack, right? They got all those big bodies. They got all these running backs that coming in. So I think Montgomery fits in perfectly, and he's got an edge to him. He wants to compete. He understands that quarterback room there. So to me, Ryan Montgomery, love the fit. I thought it was a really good, encouraging performance for him.
Yeah, give Mike Bobo, Kirby Smart a lot of credit for the quick work that they did, because another name that they were in contention for was Matt Zollers out of the state of Pennsylvania. He was here this weekend. He committed to Missouri. It was kind of a coin toss recruitment that went all the way to the end. It's a pretty intriguing cat, Drew. We got him ranked number 61, 6th quarterback in the country. I just mentioned it at the top of the show. We got an update coming tomorrow as well. This is one of those names names that we have spent a lot of time on studying. We've seen him now twice this offseason. He punched his ticket to the Elite 11 finals as well. So we'll get to see him 3 times in about 60 days. What did you like from him?
Very kind of unique when we talk about this group of quarterbacks. You know, he's a loose but dynamic athlete. Another kid with a basketball background. He can punch it on the open floor. And I was talking to him as things got underway because I had heard from Missouri's coaching staff, hey, Matt Zollers plays more golf than any other quarterback we've ever met. Turns out he's a 7 handicap, so he is good at golf. And he says he's only been playing for 2 years. I don't know if that's accurate. I don't know if he was messing with me, but I'm jealous. Zollers wasn't the most consistent. I think he was kind of up and down, but man, the good was really, really good. And Coop, you know, you asked me this on the phone, kind of compare him to some other quarterbacks we've seen in recent cycles. And the name I keep coming back to is Avery Johnson, who is obviously a darling of the Oyster Boys, expected to be a big name in the Big 12 as he takes over there at Kansas State. We saw him in the Pop-Tart Bowl, but I think they're similar in different ways. Zollers, you know, he throws a lot of fastballs. Sometimes it's not the tightest of spirals, but he gets it from point A to point B. Another guy that's very comfortable on the run, and he's just loose. He's confident in what he can do. Coop, at the end of the Elite 11, one of the final stations, they kind of had a I wouldn't call it an official deep ball contest. It kind of came together out of nowhere. Zollers ripped it about 60 yards down the field. So I think he's got a ton of developmental upside. You know, how much has he really been coached up by a quarterback trainer? Needs some polish. But, man, he's kind of one of my favorites here in the class of 2025. And then you go back to that game tape, what he's ever been able to do at Spring Ford. I mean, this is a gritty quarterback. He can beat you with his legs. He can convert runs on 3rd and 4th down, those short conversions. He can get the job done. So a lot to like. Easy to see why Georgia, easy to see why Alabama, all those schools threw their hat in the ring. And he's headed to Missouri, man, to play for Drink and offensive coordinator Kirby Moore.
Sure, pretty intriguing group. I keep going back to that word, but at the top you got Montgomery, Zollers, 2 guys that we're really familiar with. We're continuing to kind of dial in on a guy like Malik Washington, but you got other guys out there like Beckham Kritza. I mentioned the Nittany Lions commit. You got commits from Clemson, Duke as well. What did you think about the rest of the group there, and was there one that maybe kind of stood out from the rest?
Let's bring up Kritza, and I think Malik Washington's kind of in the same category. I mean, Kritza was the tallest quarterback there. He is 6'5". Now he is lean. He is skinny, and he kind of reminds me a little bit of Nico Iamaleava in that sense. And I brought that up to Brian Stump, who does an excellent job with the Elite 11, and he kind of turned to me with his eyes, and he's like, okay, I can see that as well. You know, Kritza, he's got the raw tools, the raw traits. He's just not the most consistent. I mean, he will drop an absolute dime, and then the next rep, it's, you know, what's going on with the footwork. And I call him the nomad of this group, this class of quarterbacks. I mean, he was in California. He was in Colorado. He goes down to Miami Central, goes back to Colorado. Now he's back at Miami Central. He's a guy that just needs to play football. And we say it's so important with the quarterback position. You need to start games. And you look at Ryan Montgomery, he has started 33 games. He's going to be a 4-year starter. Beckham Kritza, you know, I think he's going to maybe get to 15, 16. And the coaches at Miami Central, they don't guarantee anything to anyone. I mean, Beckham Kritza transferred in there to the South Florida powerhouse last year, thought he was going to be the starter. I think he threw 1 pass in a Hail Mary situation against Las Vegas Bishop Gorman. So, you know, you can see it with him, but you just wish he was a little bit further along in his developmental stage. And, you know, Coop, Drew Aller was out there, Jackson Smolik, the 2 Penn State quarterbacks. I mean, this camp was in the shadows of Penn State's campus. It was like on campus. You know, all the student dining was right there. So those guys were hanging out. And obviously Ethan Grunkmeyer is there in State College. They have a really strong quarterback room. And, you know, Beckham Kritza is a guy that, you know, boom or bust. I think you can talk yourself into that. You know, are they looking at some other arms? I'm not sure. You know, Ryan Montgomery was a name they were linked to. Malik Washington is another name they've been linked to. I get the idea with Beckham Kritza. We need to see something this fall for him. I think that's going to be so important. You know, what's the completion percentage look like? What does the tape look like? So, you know, interesting kind of there. with Malik Washington, man, he's a guy that my eyes just continue to go back to. He's over 6'4". He can change the arm angles, generate a ton of whip in that upper half. He's won a ton of games at Archbishop Spalding in Maryland there. And I want to know what's going to happen with this recruitment. UCF's been involved, Maryland's been involved, Virginia Tech, Baylor's reached out, Syracuse has been in there. At one point, Oregon was kicking the tires. He's a true dual threat talent. And Coop, he is a absolute lock for my annuals freaks list. I mean, he can get it done on the basketball court. Won a pretty kind of high-level dunk contest back in the winter months. He was playing with his high school team. I mean, he was going head-to-head with guys that are going to play college hoops. And 360 like windmills, I think he calls it like an East Bay. I didn't know what that was, and he thought it was kind of funny. I guess that's when you go between the legs. But, man, he's a polarizing talent in the sense that huge monster ceiling for him, and it's kind of wide open. So I want to know if he gets an invite here to the Elite 11 finals. I think they've given out 14 so far. The final 6 will come out in the final over the next few days before the holiday weekend, and I think Malik Washington's put himself right in that mix to punch his ticket to LA.
Elite 11 finals, certainly one of the most entertaining events of the offseason. That will happen June 18th to June 20th in Redondo Beach. Andrew Ivins, myself, and a couple more of the 24/7 sports team will be there. Excited for that, Drew. As you mentioned, 14 of the 20 have punched their ticket, 6 more awaiting. It's going to be interesting to see who those names will be. We'll revisit that in a second. But, Drew, there was another combine there in PA this weekend. That's the All-22 combine, which takes place before the quarterback workouts. And this is often I would say luxury for us to get to see some of these guys work out that show up to this event. And you got to see a couple of them in this Andrew Olesh kid keeps coming up, Drew, that you like so much.
Yeah, I mean, someone where you turn on the tape and you love it, but he's playing primarily outside wide receiver. And that's common with the tight end position at this stage in their development. A lot of those guys don't get inline experience because they don't need to, because they're a mismatch on Friday night. So I really wanted to see Olesh size him up. Came in at 6'5", right around 215 pounds. Coop, unofficial 4.13 in the short shuttle, 4.6 in the 40-yard dash, and you see him right here. I thought the separation, the suddenness, the burst as a route runner, everything you want to see. And then he just caught pretty much anything that came his way, right? They did one-on-ones before the quarterbacks got going, and then he hung around and ran some routes for them. He's a stock-up kid for me. Michigan, Penn State, Florida, Alabama, all involved. What you want to see in that tight end position, and kind of, I'm not saying he's like Luke Reynolds from last cycle who ended up signing with the Nittany Lions, but a guy that I think we're going to fall in love with just given how he catches the football. Someone you can kind of move around. I think you could play him in an H-back role. He was impressive, and I said it, like he made himself some money. I guess we can say that now in the NIL era. I mean, he came to the NFL scouting combine, and he checked off all the boxes, and I think that's going to be go a long way in his recruitment. Matt Henderson, the Penn State commit, wrote it in my story. First real exposure the recruiting industry had to this kid. He's from a small town in Virginia, basketball-focused athlete throughout his youth. He thought he was going to potentially play, D2, D3 hoops. Had 1,000 yards receiving last year. Another guy that's out wide. I thought it was a strong showing for him. If you're a Penn State fan, you got to be excited about Luke Reynolds. Now you got Matthew Henderson coming right behind him. It was a solid day for him. And then a wide receiver. We always talk about the Penn State wide receiver situation. Lyric Samuel out of New York. He is skinny. He is skinny, very, very skinny, but he's 6'3". He was a tough cover during one-on-one. So like those Penn State commits, those two, easy to see them. You think about the new offensive coordinator coming over from Kansas, what they're going to try to do in terms of creating mismatches, putting guys in position to make plays. I think those guys could be weapons for Ethan Grunkmeyer, Beckham Kritza, Jackson Smolik, whoever it's going to be there at Penn State in the coming years.
Yeah, good news for a Penn State offense that's trying to get it rolling. They're obviously trying to upgrade in the talent acquisition department, especially at the skill position. They've done a wonderful job at the tight end position. You mentioned Matt Henderson, Andrew Olesh, another guy from PA. We'll see what happens there with his recruitment. Drew, back to the quarterbacks. We mentioned 14 of the 20 have punched their ticket. I believe we have a graphic of those guys. I just kind of want to get your thoughts generally with more than a month out here, a little less than a month, excuse me, but before the Elite 11 finals, maybe some of those guys that you're most interested in seeing. There's been a couple guys on this show that have been well documented. You think about guys like Tavian St. Clair. You think about guys like Julian Lewis, we saw in Longstreet. We've seen some of those guys. Is there one guy that you're just like cannot wait to see in that setting and really kind of rack and stack against some of the best arms in the country?
Well, I'm going to throw this back on you because I want to hear your answer to this. And you're right, 14 of the 20 have gone out. I do not think Bryce Underwood, the LSU commit, our number one ranked prospect, is going to be at the Elite 11 finals. He didn't do a regional. He was at the Nike Next One event talking with Brian Stump. Potentially he could show up, but, I would wager we're not going to get him, and that's fine. I like this group that they've invited so far. The guy I have circled is Keelan Russell, and I had a chance to see him at Battle Miami back in January, that 7-on-7 tournament. I've seen most of these other guys. I'm trying to figure him out, where he stacks up in this. I think you could say the same thing about Matt Zollers, Husan Longstreet, but really to me, Keelan Russell is the one I can't wait to see in this setting. And I brought it up, I think, last week on the show or before that. You're watching footage of another guy at the Elite 11 camp, and you see the line right there, and you're like, who's that? It's Keelan Russell. You kind of feel good about that reaction just off the eye test. So what about you? I mean, who are you fired up to see out here in a few weeks?
I think you took the most popular answer. I think there's a lot of intrigue with Keelan Russell because I haven't seen him live personally. You turn on the tape, you kind of get a good sense of the makeup, not only the physical makeup, but what he's built between the ears. We've done a lot of research on this kid. Everything's really kind of come back positive. I think the recruitment is wide open. I think it makes for a really interesting case, really interesting week for Keelan Russell to kind of see what he's going to be like. Drew, the three guys that I would say that are kind of like upward trajectory right now, just moving in the right direction. Tavian St. Clair, we've talked about him. Another guy, Matt Zollers, who you saw this weekend, we like a lot. And then Keelan Russell, right? Those are kind of the trio of names that we feel like if we were in the stock market, we'd be pretty aggressive with. On the flip side of that, how about George McIntyre, right? George McIntyre is a guy that we've gotten to see twice this offseason. He's coming off a 2-win season last year as a starter. This was and is a pivotal offseason for George McIntyre, the 5-star. He earned his invite to the Elite 11 finals yesterday. This is going to be a big week for him, and the reason I say that is you're going to get to see how he really kind of fits in with these group of elite arms. And I talked about those three guys. That's who I really kind of want to stack him up against. Basketball player. He's had some opportunities to maybe play that sport at the next level. He's a long kid, 6'6", athletic, can get outside of the pocket. He does some good things. But Drew, I have to tell you, I think you and I are in the same boat here. He's been underwhelming this offseason just in terms of what we've seen in person. He has not really fit in with that group. So this is a guy that I'm going to be pretty interested to see. Are you in a sink or in a swim when you get out there with some of the best arms in the country, and what is that going to look like? So he's got a great opportunity in the next month or so to really kind of rebound and show what he is capable of, and that's kind of the storyline that I'm going to be following. And outside of that, Deuce Knight, I think we've put him in position, and we've talked about him enough that I think everybody out there who watches this show knows how talented, how athletic the profile is of Deuce Knight. What is that going to look like? Can he take the next step going into his senior season? And that's the biggest thing, because Deuce Knight, in my opinion, has got all of the ability in the world. Can he just put it together on the field? I want to see him have a consistent performance like he did in Oxford. Can he continue to build on that in LA?
Yeah, I think 3 strong days would go a long way with Deuce Knight, who It's been up and down, right? One week we like him, the next week you see him in a different type of setting, and it's a different story. You're right about George McIntyre, Coop, and I went into our next gen system, went back into my notes from him during that junior season where it was a sub 500 record, where they weren't that good. What I had written down is, receivers are not making the plays for him in terms of what is this going to look like when he's got some P4 SEC caliber athletes. Are they going to make those catches? And having dug into him at the Elite 11 regional and then the Under Armour Next camp there in Nashville, I don't know, because I thought the ball placement, especially at that intermediate level, that's where George kind of struggled. Now he's got a great deep ball. He can get some moon balls out there, let guys run underneath it. But I think the easy ones are where he struggles. So you're right. My eyes are going to be right on George McIntyre. This is going to be a huge event for him in the evaluation process. And Coop, you brought it up. Like this isn't just our opinion. I think there is some coaching contacts that have seen the same footage we have, and everyone's kind of scratching their heads a little bit. So it's going to be a big 3 days for him, big 3 days for Deuce Knight. What about so far, like any kind of sleeper you're excited to see out there? Maybe a guy that's not ranked high.
I think Bryce Baker. Bryce Baker was a guy committed to North Carolina. I got to see at the Elite 11 regionals in Atlanta. He earned the invite after that camp. I mean, he is put together, man. When you see him, I like the way he moves. He's a good athlete. Biggest thing with him, he was just consistent. I thought he had one of the most solid days out of any of the signal callers there. So I'm excited to see what he can do. That's going to be a great opportunity for him to have that exposure at that level among that crop of quarterback. He was like very unfazed. Faze and Brandon was there. There was Camario Taylor was there, committed to Mississippi State. He looked like one of the highest floor prospects there. The other guy, Drew, that I think you and I are kind of chomping at the bit to see, how about TJ Lateef, committed to Nebraska, right? A guy that we have tucked in the back end of the top 247. He's been a muddied evaluation. I think we all know the arm talent is there, up and down at times last year at Orange Lutheran. I think the other thing is you got to take into consideration a lot of different variables with him. So I'm excited to see him. He throws it well on air. I think this is his type of environment, but I kind of want to see, outside of Dylan Raiola, all right, what's that quarterback room going to look like in Lincoln? I think Lateef is one of those guys that we got to keep an eye on, because there's definitely some physical traits there to bet on, not only on Saturdays, but maybe even beyond as well.
I think we've mentioned 10 of 14 right now. Tramel Jones, the Florida State commit, he has gotten better each season, year over year there at Jacksonville Mandarin High School. They loved him when they got him at the regional there in Oxford, Mississippi. I think he could turn some heads out there as well. I don't know where these 6 final invites are going to go, who they're going to go to. I had heard Ty Hawkins and TJ Lateef are likely going to make it. If you could pick one more quarterback to throw into this group, I didn't even know how we got here with an Elite 11 preview, but anyone you're hoping gets the call here over the next few days?
Camario Taylor, committed to Mississippi State, out of the state of Mississippi. This is a guy 6'3 plus, 210 pounds. You see him in person, super athletic, very nimble outside of the pocket in a rocket arm, one-speed thrower. There is a lot of polish that needs to happen with Camario Taylor's game, but there's not a lot of people that look like Camario Taylor. You think about the velocity, the way that he can kind of get the football to any part of the field that he wants. This is the interesting part of the Elite 11, right? They have to accumulate all these scores and accuracy, and all those things get baked into this cake. They're not just looking at raw physical upside. I think if it was me and you, Drew, I think Camario Taylor would be a guy that we want to see selfishly, because this is a guy that we're going to have to do extensive research on to make sure that we feel pretty good about at the end of the day. But think about Camario Taylor, where he's going to play for Jeff Lebby at Mississippi State. I mean, this is a kid. If you could be at Starkville, like, this is the dude that you want, right? Sure, high floor, low ceiling, but give me that guy every single day in Starkville to work with. And I think Camario Taylor, he's got some just physical gifts that are really, really hard to come by. So I'd love to see that kid out in L.A.
Yeah, that's a good one. I'm going to say Achilles Smith, the Oregon commit, son of the former NFL quarterback, Achilles Smith Jr. He'd be one. Camario would be one as well. And then I brought up Malik Washington, who we just saw at that State College regional. I think any of those three. Hey, we have to do the top 247. That's not fun. I cannot imagine picking 20 quarterbacks after you've gone around the country would be easy. So those guys have a difficult task, and I do not envy them this week.
Guys, I mentioned the Elite 11 Finals, June 18th to June 20th, and all the coverage you need right here at 247sports.com. Our recruiting team, our scouting team, working hard around the clock to give you all the up-to-date information that you need. Make sure to subscribe to 247sports.com. All right, Drew, we had a big decommitment over the weekend, and let's not sugarcoat it. 5-star Dakorien Moore decommits from LSU, and that's a big one, Drew, especially if you're in Baton Rouge. We talked about Bryce Underwood, #1 player in the country, #1 signal caller in the country. This one hurts a little bit for him, I would imagine. He's back on the market, #4 player, #1 receiver. Been committed to LSU since August of 2023. Texas currently trending on the 247 Sports crystal ball. Tom Lloyd, Jordan Scruggs, Hank South, all with picks. Mike Roach of 247 Sports, Papa Roach. He said on the 247 Sports recruiting show that this had, quote unquote, been coming for a while. So Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, all in the mix, all with OVs coming into May, in late June. LSU got some options as well. Jamie French, Khalil Lockett, CJ Wiley have all been linked to the Tigers. Let's start with LSU right now, who has one other receiver committed. That's Teron Francis, who we like, out of Edna Carr in New Orleans. That has not been a position that they have been lacking. We had Cortez Hankton on the show, co-OC, receivers coach down there in Baton Rouge. He's done a tremendous job. 2 first-round draft picks, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr. That being said, we're kind of wondering, all right, who's next to emerge? And we like some young guys, Kylan Billiot. You think about Kyle Parker, Shelton Sampson as well, KJ Lacey, kind of the vet in that room. Drew, to me, just initial reaction, are they going to be okay? Yes. Does it hurt? Because I think just going back and revisiting Dakorien Moore, where there was maybe 5 or 6 guys like him last year, there's only one of him this year, in my opinion.
Is Cortez, are we ever going to get a coach back on the show? It's like the negative bump. You come on the recruiting show.
Curse.
Yeah, the curse. We got a curse. Reaction. I mean, Mike Roach teased this. He had been saying it for a while now that he thought Dakorien was going to open it back up. I don't think LSU, it certainly stings if you want to talk about a sting factor. I mean, it's up there because you're right. He is the best of the best when it comes to these wide receivers. Now, if we dropped him into last year's pool, that 2024 cycle, is Dakorien Moore wide receiver 1? No, I don't think so. I think he's closer to 32 than he is #1, especially with Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams, who was also there, Cam Coleman, and we can keep going up and down the board. I don't know, Coop. My instant thoughts are we've gotten to the negotiation process in this recruitment, and you got some big players there, right? You got some, and I'm not saying LSU's not involved in that in any sense, but Oregon, what they've done through high school recruiting in the transfer portal, Texas, Ohio State, not surprised it's these 3 that he's considering.
It is interesting from the NIL standpoint. If you look at 3 of the top NIL programs in the country, just my personal opinion, it would be these 3 schools, right? It would be Texas, Oregon, and Ohio State. Ohio State has come a tremendously long way in the NIL space in a short amount of time, so you got to give them a lot of credit. The team right now that seems to be in a place where they're still trying to figure out their NIL alignment and some of their financials seems to be LSU. You think about the well-documented spring portal defensive line missing on some high-end targets. Dakorien Moore is the #1 receiver in the country, and he's going to more than likely demand a big number. And Drew, you talked about this. We talk about this all the time. There is the traditional recruitment that gets you to about this point in time in late May. And then there becomes, all right, let's come to the table and let's figure out what's what. That is, in my opinion, probably how we have arrived here. It doesn't mean Dakorien Moore didn't like his potential fit playing with Bryce Underwood, a really talented offensive line, Harlan Berry, Joe Sloan, Cortez Hankton. I'm sure all of that checked a lot of boxes, but at the end of the day, when you have teams with a very similar pitch. You got Ryan Day, Brian Hartline at Ohio State, Will Stein, Dan Lanning, those guys obviously doing some things with the Ducks. And then you got Texas right now, who I think's got one of the hottest fastballs in the game when it comes to offensive skill recruiting. And then it becomes a dollar amount game. That's where it's going to be really, really tough to keep up. So, Drew, the other side of this, if the crystal ball does hold up, I mean, what does, in your mind, Dakorien Moore mean for those fans out there that are big fans of the Burnt Orange?
It would be a monster addition. Him, Ryan Wingo. We'll see. We like Trey Owens last cycle. I mean, they have figured out the offensive line, in my opinion, in terms of getting the right pieces in there. They obviously get it done at running back. I mean, it would keep things humming. He's someone that can impact the game on special teams as a returner if he wanted to go that route. But I think he's an inside receiver that can see a high volume of targets, and he would make things tricky for some of those SEC defenses out there. He'd be a guy where it's like, okay, we have to recruit someone to cover Dakorien Moore because we're going to play them at some point this season.
All right, guys, make sure to submit your questions. We'll get the viewer questions at the end of the show. A lot of Notre Dame fans in here. A lot of Notre Dame fans making the case for Will Black. I'll address that. I'm sure Drew's got some comments on that as well. So we'll talk a little Will Black at the end of the show as well. So make sure you get those in there. Drew, speaking of, real quick little promo. 24/7 Sports live every Thursday, 5 o'clock Eastern Time. Make sure you are locked in. Great content there that you can find on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. That is 24/7 Sports Live. Make sure to tune in this Thursday. All right, Drew, we got the rankings update preview. A lot of different ways we could go with this one. You and I have spent a lot of time on the phone, along with the rest of the scouting team here, not just in the last 48 hours, but over the last couple weeks as well, trying to button this thing up as much as possible. Not going to make everybody happy. That's kind of the plan. That's the way it goes. It's a thankless job. But Drew, some of the themes that I kind of wrote down here within the top 247 quarterbacks, we talked about what you saw at the Elite 11. We talked about what we should see at the Elite 11 in LA. Could be some talented group of offensive tackles at the top of the board. The cornerbacks, where do you find those guys? Also, potentially a couple calculated shots. So I guess I'll just ask you, peer to peer, when you're going through this and you're putting this top 247 together, maybe as a director of scouting, what's like the first thought that kind of goes through your mind when you're looking at crafting this top 247, and maybe some things that kind of stick out to you in the process?
Well, the big thing is, Coop, I mean, we're going from 16 5-stars to 32 5-stars, a full 32-player living and breathing field. We introduced this last cycle, and we did some self-scouting, right? We did it a little bit earlier. We wanted to get through this whole Under Armour Next Camp series. We wanted to get through the Elite 11 regional tour so we could see the guys in all different parts of the country. So, I mean, the main focus of this update was on that top 32. We felt good, I think, about 5 prospects, and then we got 21 others in there that we're taking some calculated shots, and we're hoping the floor doesn't fall out as we get into the senior seasons and as we get into those all-star games, right? The All-American Bowl, the Under Armour game last year, a lot of the premier talent opted out of those, started college football playoff practices. I think there's a good chance that's going to happen again, but senior seasons matter, right? So I think we are positioning guys for potential moves, and that's just not in the top 32. I think that's across the board. And then the other thing is, we're leaning on verified exposure points, verified data. This wasn't some type of full audit where, hey, we're rebuilding it 1 through 247. We've gone position by position and stacked these guys how we want. It's more so of, okay, this guy was at this camp, he came in at this. You match it up with what he did as a junior. Maybe he had a spring football game. You had that in some states, Florida. There was a bunch in Alabama last week, Georgia as well, some different states with football. So 32 is the focus. Guys that have popped off on the offseason radar where we maybe didn't have data points. And then, Coop, the other thing personally for me, which I was trying to move guys up the board was the wide receivers and the cornerbacks. I mean, go to the NFL draft, this past NFL draft. That serves as the compass for us, right? That is so important. Remember Thursday, Friday, how many wide receivers were selected? How many offensive players, skill players were selected early on? I felt like we needed to find some wide receivers, shoot them up the board, and we've done that. I had a call with you this morning. I said it. Feel much better about the wide receiver position heading into the summer and the senior seasons. And I feel better about the cornerback position. 36 corners drafted in the 2024 NFL draft. That is a premium position. I think we have found some height, weight, speed guys across the country. It's not just in one area. Maybe there's some more that I like, others that I wish, had a fifth star next to their name. It's fine. It won't happen now. But corners, wide receivers, quarterbacks, big focus of the update.
Yeah, I would say for me, not lesson learned, but maybe just observing and, going into year 3 of this, there's not always going to be 32 guys that you have top 32 grades on. Sometimes it's less than that. Sometimes it's 25. Sometimes it's 16. When you compare this class, at least as a whole, pound for pound, to last year, which was a really talented class. We talked about receiver. We talked about some of these other positions as well. At this point in May, before their senior season, this is not one where I feel is like, hey, there's like 32 guys where we're kind of emerging here. I feel like, all right, 25 through 32, these are more guys with more high day 2 grades that we're just going to have to take calculated shots on, right? And that's the thing. So I think the other part of this is, because of the job that we do and because of the industry that we're in, there are going to be 32 guys with 5 stars on them, but there might only be 16 that we're actually convicted in based on a given year. And the rest of the half of the first round, you're kind of looking at like, all right, I got my fingers crossed, right? And these are the guys that have shown the most promise. But these are guys that are going to have to take a leap going into their senior year. And I think the other thing that you said is fascinating. Like, I look at the teams in it for Dakorien Moore, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas. If you want a receiver 1, outside of Dakorien Moore, you got Khalil Lockett, right? You got Caleb Cunningham. You have some names. If you were to throw that group in that receiver crop last year, those guys would be probably not in the top 32 outside of Dakorien Moore, and even probably in kind of somewhere in that second round. So this is the year, you kind of view it through the NFL draft lens, like, hey, the quarterback crop is not what you think. So you got to make a move here. If you want that guy, this is the only guy. That's kind of how I see the market kind of shaping up, if that makes sense.
Well, Courtney Crutchfield, who was in the All-American Bowl, right, signed with Missouri. Where did he finish in the wide receiver rankings for us? 10, somewhere around that, 8, 9, 10. I think there's a lot of the receivers we have right now. I don't know if they would be higher than Courtney Crutchfield if we dropped them into this class. And you move them back to that class, they jump up a year. Where do they slot in? I think it's closer to 50 than it is 32. With that being said, can we talk about like some positions I like where I do think there are strengths?
Of course.
Offensive tackle. I think you would be in alignment here with me. O-tackle, I think there's a lot of good names. Some guys that are going to be in that day 3 range that will have a chance to move up. But I think there's some premium big bodies there. Corner, it's kind of the year of the tall corner. DJ Pickett, Devin Sanchez, Naeem Offord, Dejon Lee. I mean, there's some towers out there, and all those guys have good track and field markers as well, which is, if you're going to be over 6'2", NFL draft data shows that you got to be kind of elite in some type of TNF event, and those guys have that. So, like the corners, like the offensive tackles. I guess another question mark, edge rusher. Zayden Walker, we like. After that, I think it's kind of wide open.
Yeah, the edge rusher group. Zayden Walker, I believe we have as a linebacker, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so... But you're right. Isaiah Gibson we have at the top of the board. I think there, potential question marks there. Jarrett Smith as well, who's a big physical freak, who we like a lot. Outside of that, he's got to play into that. It's got to play into that size. Same thing as well. Those edge rushers, a little bit sparse in terms of what you're looking for. So it just goes to show, like USC maybe grabbing one out of the two between even a Justice Terry, who's an interior guy, and Isaiah Gibson would be a big win, because it's not this overflowing market that we've seen in the past of big edge rushers. Guys, if you have questions, make sure to send them in. We'll now get to those questions. And Drew, we're getting hit up in more ways than one from our boy Michael, Dallas fan of Notre Dame, and we figured this would be coming at some point. Will Black, all right, if you don't know who Will Black is committed to Notre Dame, offensive tackle. We have currently ranked in the 3-star ranks. And I think we're an outlier there. Obviously, some other services have him higher than where we do currently. Drew, we've done our homework on Will Black. We got an update coming out tomorrow as well. A lot of the questions here, right, from Blyberg, he says Will Black is a legit 6'7", 300 pounds, running a 4.9 laser, basically 25, 30 pounds heavier than David Sanders, former competitive hockey player. Michael, Dallas fan, says if the NFL draft is a compass, Will Black is the furthest thing from a 3-star recruit. These are just, comments without a ton of context. That's what I'll say here. But no, go ahead.
Those guys rank them 1 through 247. I'd love to see their work. Where's their rankings and where they're at in their process?
No, I get it. I think for us, 6'7", 300 pounds. I think the other thing, with Will Black, we have not seen him live. We have not had a live exposure to us. We continue to kind of say this. Our process is our process. It's not going to be dictated by anybody else, and that's with all due respect to anybody else. Everybody has their own individual process when it comes to the service industry as well. So, our process with Will Black has been a little bit more patient, wait for the athletic context to come up to it. Obviously, off a size estimation, 6'7", 300 pounds, playing in the state of Connecticut, this is a guy that right now, we're still trying to figure out, all right, is he going to be that prototypical left tackle? I certainly think he's a good enough athlete to play the right side. I think you can move him inside if you want to. I think he's an above-average athlete. I don't know if he's an elite-level athlete. Drew talked about the strength of the offensive tackle board, right? And here's where it comes in terms of where we feel pretty convicted at the top of the board. David Sanders, two-way player, quick twitch, explosive, also a guy who plays basketball, swimming as well. We love what he brings to the table. Ty Haywood, right, 35-inch arms, almost a 7-foot wingspan, one of the cleanest guys playing high-level competition. Andrew Babalola from Kansas, basketball background, hasn't been playing the game that long, 7-foot wings, got some things to clean up, but love his raw developmental upside. Carter Lowe, right, you think about him, 3-sport athlete, light on his feet, good reactionary quickness, can do a lot of different things, can actually think he can hold up at left tackle. And then that's without even talking about Josh Petty, Michael Fasusi, some of these guys with the redeeming traits and qualities that we really, really, really like. I think there is a case there for our guy, Will Black. I think the biggest thing with us is we want to continue to evaluate. We want to continue to be patient. And it's May. It's May before their senior season with a guy that we are still digging in on. And that being said, regardless of where anybody has him ranked, we're going to go through our process and we'll arrive at our own conclusions, at our own timeline. Can things change? Absolutely, but that's where it is right now. And I'll say this, Notre Dame is getting a very, very good football player. They should not care what we think about him, and this is a guy that fits exactly what they want to do. So if you're a Notre Dame fan complaining about this, you should be really, really happy that you're getting a really quality tackle that can play multiple positions on the offensive line that fits your program, right? We'll get it right at the end of the day. I have the full confidence in that. That's kind of my spiel on Will Black.
Hey, we saw the workout footage from his showcase last week. Was that last week? Yeah, I think the one nugget that was admitted is also Will Black is, I believe, the oldest offensive tackle out of everyone you just kind of rattled off there. Look, I agree. Him moving in that non-padded setting looked awesome. Yeah, loved it. I think that's going to be a big fuel behind where he's ranked tomorrow. To me, I don't think the tape is where it needs to be for that type of projection everyone in the Notre Dame fan base is thinking with Will Black, and we can leave it at that with him.
Another question from a good friend of ours, living rent-free in UT. It's a good question. He says, question, if KJ Lacey had a top 3 performance at the Elite 11 finals, would he jump in the rankings? I think the thing that's interesting about KJ Lacey, I don't want to speak for Andrew Ivins, it's why we go to this event, right? We want to see how these guys stack up against each other. The thing with KJ is, all right, kind of seeing where he fits in the mold of projecting to Sundays. And this is same thing I kind of talked about with Will Black. That's not to say that KJ Lacey isn't going to go to Texas or somewhere else and be a really good fit for what they do. It's about how KJ Lacey projects to the NFL. There's a lot of data, especially when it comes to quarterbacks his size, that we'll have to pour through. And then you have to figure out, all right, is he the exception or is he the rule? And is he the exception to the rule, right? And which guys do you want to bet on at the end of the day? That being said, KJ Lacey, gamer, like the fit currently in Austin.
Yeah, and he just played his spring game last week. I could not find that footage anywhere through any of the back channels. I know he played a spring. I couldn't even find a stat line for it. I was kind of interested in that. No, another kind of point guard distributor back there. I would think, there's a chance he shines out there. He could certainly move up. We'll see. We'll see with KJ Lacey.
Drew, I think. Hold on. I think that's all we got. Here's a question from you from Michael, because Michael, we appreciate you being on the show. This is what he says. He says, sleeping emoji, because we are not going to see Notre Dame recruits live, it's legit, and all of Notre Dame's recruiting falls and wait for their senior season's high school, but not Ohio State commits just film. I don't understand where you guys get this type of stuff. The live evaluation is important. We're talking about projecting 16, 17-year-old prospects to where we think they're going to get drafted in the NFL. Not only is the live evaluation huge, right? The supplemented data points in terms of verified height, weight, wingspan, arm length, where these guys fit in, how they project, are they multi-sport athletes, seeing them on a good setting, what's their level of competition. I mentioned he's playing in Connecticut. Those are all things taken into consideration for every prospect across the board. Every single prospect we look at is going through that same extensive vetting process. It's not just Notre Dame guys that were kicking the can down the road that you love to say. That's not it. Everybody's going through the same exhaustive vetting process that sometimes, we got to be a little bit more patient. We're not trying to be first. We're trying to be right. Ultimately, at the end of the day, 3 or 4 years from now, are you going to say, hey, these guys got it right first, I care about that? Or are you going to look back and say they got the final ranking right? All right, so there's 2 sides to every story. That's where we're at on this, and it takes time. It takes time. It's not going to be when you want it. That's not how it works. Not every player that commits to your favorite program is going to be a 5-star. That is not the world that we live in. And, I'm using Mike, I'm using you as an example because this is stuff that we hear a lot, but it's not the way that it works there. Drew, I don't know if you have anything to add on that. Mike, I'm not taking any more questions from you today. You're just getting me fired up.
Wait, so he's saying we make it a priority to see Ohio State commits, but not Notre Dame commits? Is that?
Yeah, like I said, you can take Notre Dame, Ohio State, you can flip-flop that. We've heard that multiple times. I guess that's the reason why I'm addressing it, but.
Damn, just so much Notre Dame hate on the pod. I thought Ivan Taylor
really
and Dallas
class,
Golden
man.
I thought Ivan Taylor and Dallas Golden had 2 of the top spring game performances that I've watched so far. Watched full games on them, but hey, Notre Dame hater here.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. Drew, I think that's it. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
That's all I got, man. Just a win at all cost alumni over here.
Win at all costs analyst, win at all costs alumni. Guys, we appreciate you being locked into the show. Remember, no show tomorrow because we got a rankings update coming out. We're really excited about that. If you couldn't tell, previewing that all today. But make sure to stay locked into the Oyster Boys every Tuesday and Wednesday, noon Eastern time. Also, make sure to like and subscribe. You can find us on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel and on X. For Andrew Ivins, I'm Cooper Petagna. We'll see you next week.